Welcome back to another podcast, the official start of college football. I know they played in Australia last week, but this is the start. Welcome in, Deuce. How you doing?
I'm good. Second episode this year. This time it actually feels real. I'm tasting football in the air all of a sudden.
The weather is also a big factor in feeling football right now.
You're right. Last week it was near 90 here. This morning it was in the upper 50s. I think that's exactly why I'm feeling this way.
As we waited for football, we got a nice treat last week with the golf.
Yeah, I've never been a big proponent of the FedEx Cup playoffs. It seems kind of like manufactured excitement. But man, last week I know our little text chain was all watching. It was good for the game, I think, seeing Spieth and DJ go head-to-head and playing, 8, 9 out of 10 on the scale of good golf. It was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into that in the next podcast with your preview for this weekend. But it's all about football right now. Let's dive right into college. We're going to go through our college football preview starting in the ACC Atlantic, where it is stacked with the likes of Florida State, Louisville, Clemson. Give me your overall impression of the ACC Atlantic.
Typical ACC Atlantic, dominated by Florida State. But this year, I think there's some players to watch. There's individual talent is kind of the theme of this division of the ACC. But it's really Florida State's conference division to lose. They're just deep on both sides of the ball. DeAndre Francois coming back. He should improve. Their talent on defense, to me, is what really sticks out. Darwin James might be my favorite player in the country. He's going to be top 5 pick in the draft. So, to me, the ACC Atlantic is all about Florida State, Jimbo Fisher's team.
I agree. Does the schedule worry you at all? They do get Clemson at home, opening with Bama. Never an easy task. You get Florida at the end of the year away. I think it's favorable, but anything worry you on that schedule?
Obviously, Bama, to open the season, is a tough test. I think that's a good spot to get Bama, though. I would rather play Bama now than later in the year. They get Miami at home, I think. They get Louisville at home. Florida at the end of the year, it's always a big game for them. So at Clemson is another one. But I'm not as high on Clemson as other people are. I know they'll just plug in a quarterback similar to Sean Watson is what everyone's saying. But to me, it's a little harder than they make it seem.
I'm with you on Clemson. I was going to ask you your thoughts on the defending champs. They should be really, really good on the offensive and especially defensive line, maybe the best in the country. But as you said, they break in a new quarterback, and they have 2 stretches on their schedule that I think are really difficult, starting September 9th. Auburn at home, then at Louisville, sandwich game with Boston College, and then travel to Virginia Tech to end September. And then early November, they go to NC State, followed by Florida State, sandwich game with Citadel, and end with their state rival, South Carolina. I don't think the schedule's that favorable for them this year.
I agree, and I am appalled that you left off at Syracuse October 13th. Appalled.
We'll be making the trip.
I would love to go to a game there. I've never been. I mean, I feel like I've bet on them enough times to make that happen.
I agree. Maybe we can make it happen.
I'm with you on the schedule, though, especially that first game against Auburn. I'm high on Auburn this year. I think they have a good team. I like their quarterback upgrade. So I think the back-to-back or 3 out of 4 week stretch with Auburn at Louisville, home BC, at Virginia Tech is going to be the season teller for Clemson.
One team to me flying under the radar is Louisville. They have the Heisman Trophy winner coming back and a really good coach in Bobby Petrino. They get Clemson at home. They do have to travel to Florida State, but I think they're dangerous flying under the radar.
I guess it depends on what you mean by dangerous. Do I think they can win 9 games? Yeah, I think so, but I'm not sure they're deep enough on the outside. I don't know if they're deep enough on the lines to sustain. We saw it last year. At the end of the year, they kind of just fell apart. They lost some games that they had no business losing. Even even being close games, really. So I kind of see a similar season to them. I do think they can get off to a quick start, though. They'll beat Purdue, Carolina. Clemson's their only tough game, really, in the first 7 weeks. Then they have a big game at Florida State late October.
Anybody else that could surprise in the ACC Atlantic?
No, I don't think so. Boston College will have a player that is a top 10 draft pick, but their team, surrounding that's not very good. Syracuse, Dino Bevers might have something cooking up there. They're still a few years away, but I think they finally have a quarterback that is a decent player. So, you might have some teams that are better than people think, but nothing that's going to challenge Florida State or Clemson.
I agree with Syracuse. 19 returning starters, second year with Baber's system. I think they'll keep it close with some of those bigger names, but I don't know if they can pull the upset. I do think NC State will be a little bit better than last year. Maybe give somebody a scare, but certainly no chance to compete for that division. I'll run through the over-unders quickly. Florida State 9.5, Louisville 9.5, Clemson 9.5. NC State 6.5, Syracuse 4, Boston College 4, and Wake 5.5. Any that you like?
I think those are all good numbers. My gut when I first saw that was over on Florida State and under on Clemson, but I think they're pretty tight numbers.
Yeah, I would also lean under Clemson. And as I said, I think NC State surprises this year. I like the over 6.5 with NC State.
I can get behind that.
Any coach in this division on the hot seat?
Not really. I wouldn't say any of the seats are on fire yet.
So do you have
obviously not Jimbo and Dabo.
Do you have Florida State coming out of the Atlantic?
I do.
I agree on that. Over to the Coastal. We hit it last year with Justin Fuente taking Vatech to the conference championship. Can they repeat?
I don't know if they can repeat, but I think they're going to be in the conversation. I think this is an intriguing division just from the standpoint. I think them and Miami have a legit shot to get there, and both would be good stories for college football. I actually lean Miami, and maybe it's just I can't get away from Mark Richt, but I just think they have a really, really talented defense. And I think in a division where the offenses aren't particularly good, I think something like that could set you apart from other teams.
Everything you said is exactly what plays into me picking Virginia Tech. I'm sick of hearing that this is the year of the U. I like Mark Richt, thought he did a great job at Georgia, but ultimately he's going to lose a game or two that he shouldn't, and Miami will be 9-3. I think Vatech has the higher ceiling. This is a two-team race to me, clearly, in this side of the conference. So I'm going to lean Virginia Tech. No Florida State or Louisville on their schedule. So I'm going to go Virginia Tech to repeat again with Fuente. If any of those other 5 teams were to sneak up, who do you think it could be?
I really don't like any of the other 5 teams.
Flip a coin.
Boy, I guess it would have to be Carolina, I guess, if you're forcing me. I mean, I want to say Duke, but they just don't have the guys. That's
exactly what I would have said. I love Cutcliffe. They get their quarterback back. I think they'll be better. I don't think they have the firepower, though.
Boy, Pitt is not going to be very good. I don't think Virginia's going to stink. Georgia Tech stinks. Man, it's just by default Carolina or Duke.
Yeah. Over-unders on this side. Virginia Tech 8.5, Miami 9, Duke 4.5, Pitt 6.5, Georgia Tech 6, North Carolina 7, Virginia 5.5.
I do not like any of the over-unders in this division because, like you said, it's a 2-team race, but I don't feel great about Vatech or Miami as a contender, so I don't like either one of those teams over-under. And all the bottom feeders, who knows?
I think Virginia at 5.5 is way too many. I would go under on Virginia. I do not see any way they go 6-6 this year.
That would be a really good season, I think.
So, anybody on the hot seat here?
No, I don't think so. I don't think any of these teams have high enough expectations for anyone to really be in trouble.
You have Miami representing the Coastal.
I guess, yeah.
Any chance to beat Florida State?
No, I think Florida State just, especially at the quarterback position, that's what really sets it apart. And even though I can't stand the guy, there's a big coaching mismatch there too, I think.
Yeah, I have Florida State over Virginia Tech in the title game. Can Louisville or Clemson do enough to be in the conversation for the playoff without being in the conference title game?
No, not this year.
Okay. Moving along to the Big 12, who now has a title game. Your thoughts on the Big 12?
Well, typically we're talking about the guy we like to make money against, but this year, dare I say, I actually like Oklahoma more because someone is gone. I think this is a two-team conference with both teams coming from the state of Oklahoma.
Yes.
But I do think there's a team that's very talented on offense that could scare some teams, and that would be the Fighting Bill Snyder.
Yes.
But I do think this is an Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State end of discussion type scenario. And I actually think the departure of Bob Stoops is a good thing, a little change of scenery. So I think it's an Oklahoma-style conference.
I think this is going to be an entertaining conference to me this year. Completely agree on OK State OU as a two-team race. I think OK State wins the regular season, gets a rematch in the conference title game and loses, and ends up costing the Big 12 a spot in the playoff.
Wow. I like that scenario. I can see that happening. I actually think Oklahoma gets into the playoffs this year. I think they're pretty balanced, and I think Baker Mayfield is just going to be awesome this year. Heisman Trophy candidate, obviously. I think he puts up huge numbers, and I see them sneaking in.
I can't disagree on the Baker Mayfield point. I certainly don't disagree on the Bob Stoops point. I do think they have a tougher schedule than the Pokes. They get OSU on the road, Baylor, Kansas State, and Ohio State on the road. Plus, they get Texas in the Red River Shootout. I think that schedule's pretty tough this year. The schedule's more manageable to me for Oklahoma State.
It definitely is. The Ohio State game obviously tough, but is Texas good? Do we know if they're good yet?
I think more people think they're going to be good than bad, and I think next year is the year they really take the step forward with our boy Tom Herman.
That's what I thought. I think Herman needs a year just to implement his stuff. That's why that game doesn't scare me on the schedule as much. Look, Oklahoma State, the over-under, their win total is 9.5 or 9. That's my favorite over-under bet of the year. It's coming from this conference. I think they go over. I think they win maybe 11 games this year.
That's an official play. OK State over 9.
100%.
I completely agree with you on the Fighting Snyders. 14 starters back. He's dangerous when he's got experience. They should be 4-0 heading to Texas. Manageable schedule. They have a tough 3-game stretch at Texas, TCU, and Oklahoma. But they get Texas before the Red River Shootout, and they get Oklahoma after the Red River Shootout. So I think 9-10 wins is doable for Snyder.
Yeah, their offense should be really good this year. I worry about them on defense, especially the back seven. I don't think is very strong. If one or two guys get dinged up there, especially in this conference where there are multiple good quarterbacks. You got to play Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, all with really good quarterbacks. And let's not forget they have to play West Virginia, also has a good quarterback in Will Greer. 10 is a stretch. I could see them knocking off somebody and getting to 9, though.
Thoughts on TCU? I thought that they would surprise last year and really stumbled at 6-7. I think Patterson's one of the better coaches. 17 starters back. Can they sneak into the conversation?
I Patterson, too. I don't think he is recruited as well as most people thought he would after the TCU boom a couple of years ago. I don't know. I'm not on them as much as you are. They have to go to Arkansas, which isn't terrible, but still, Arkansas at home is still a good team. And then they have a pretty brutal stretch of at Oklahoma State, home West Virginia, home Kansas State, before 2 weeks off, and then Texas, Oklahoma. I don't like the way their schedule sets up for them.
You mentioned West Virginia earlier. The over-under set at 6. I think it's a good number. I do think they take a step back this year. Your thoughts on them?
I agree. I think it's a good number, but I still think they could win 7 games, especially early in the year. If they can somehow beat Virginia Tech opening week, they could go on a little run because they have East Carolina, basically a bye, Kansas, TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor. You know, those are all very winnable games, and I wouldn't be shocked if they're favored in all but one.
Speaking of Baylor, your thoughts? Can Matt Rule right the ship or steady the ship?
I am so confused about why he took that job. I still don't understand it. I know we brought it up when it happened. I have no idea how that team can play focused each week with what's going on. No idea.
I do think he steadies the ship. It might not be this year. I think they give somebody a scare. But I do agree. I don't know what was going through his head.
They have talent, but their schedule, if you want to talk about tough stretches, Oklahoma, at Kansas State, at Oklahoma State, home to West Virginia, home to Texas in a 5-week in a row stretch. That's brutal.
That is brutal. So I laid out my scenario. You have Oklahoma representing the Big 12.
I do. I think they're a little more balanced on defense than your Oklahoma State team, so that's why I got them winning the Big 12.
Quickly through the over-unders, aside from OK State, which is an official play. Oklahoma 10, TCU 8, K-State 7.5, Texas 7.5, Baylor at 8, West Virginia 6, Texas Tech 4.5, Iowa State 5.5, and Kansas 2.5. Anything else jump out?
If I had to lean a couple other places, I would lean under Baylor, under TCU.
As far as mine goes, I'd go over with the Snyders, and I think that would be it.
What's there, 7.5?
Yes.
Yeah, that's close.
Moving along to the Big Ten.
Your conference du jour.
Start with the big boys in the East. Your overall thoughts on the East?
This is a fun conference. I mean, I know it took a lot of heat for a lot of time, but there's some big boys now. The East, to me, traditionally has been more of a 3 or 4 team race with the 2 teams from Michigan getting involved, but this year it's clearly the Ohio State University versus your Nittany Lions. I think it's going to be an awesome season to watch Big Ten football. Those 2 offenses should be cranking. Ohio State might have one of the best defensive lines in the country, so to me it's just those 2 teams, sort of like the Big 12, but these 2 teams are clearly better than anybody else.
Your thoughts on Michigan?
Inexperience, definitely. Obviously, Harbaugh is unbelievable what he does, and I would never put anything past him, but I think they have a down year this year.
Interesting team to me in this division is Sparty. After last year's 3-9 campaign, what do you expect from them this year?
I do not expect 3-9 again, but I'm not sure you can expect much more than 5.5-ish. I don't know what their over-under is. I don't
5.
have it in front of me. Yeah, they're still rebuilding after their title run 2 years ago. I'm not sure they have the horses to compete in this division with Penn State and Ohio State.
Give me your thoughts on the Terps.
They're trying to build something. In their defense, they are getting much better recruits than they were, especially athletically. They just still aren't getting the big guys up front to compete in the Big Ten. Their over-under is 3.5. I would be shocked if they win more than 3 games. They're just going to get beat up on the line of scrimmage, and they don't have a quarterback. So if you're thinking worst possible scenario, combination of two positions that you have to have in the Big Ten, it's quarterback and line play, and they have neither. So, long season ahead, I think.
Give me your thoughts on October 28th at the Horseshoe, Penn State, Ohio State.
Clearly, that's the game that determines the division to me. I want to like Penn State to win that game, but I think the teams are just so evenly matched that the edge has to go to the home team. It's, college football is defined by home field advantages and games like that. And I wish it was at Penn State so I could pick the Nets, but I'm not going to make people happy by picking Ohio State, but I have to give the edge to the home team.
I'm going to break the chef's heart as well. I need to get an early line. I really like Ohio State in that game. Penn State gets Michigan the week before. Ohio State has a bye the week before. Then they get Penn State at home. So clearly an advantage to the Buckeyes. I also think we're really going to be able to tell if JT Barrett is good or not with the addition of Kevin Wilson, the former Indiana coach, coming to be the offensive coordinator. Urban Meyer kind of being counted out, especially after what happened in the Clemson game last year. I think the Buckeyes run the table.
I can get on that too. I have over for them written down for the same reasons you like him in that game. So do I. I think the bye week's a big deal.
Yep.
I've always been a James Franklin fan, but in-game situations aren't his strong suit. And I think when you're going against Urban Meyer with a week to prepare, it's a little bit of a disadvantage.
If Penn State were to go to 11-1, obviously lose to Ohio State and not represent the East, can they still be in the playoff conversation?
Yes, I think so. Especially with their strong preseason ranking and how they ended last year, I think, people talking about them kind of gives them a little bit of an edge for that.
I'll quickly go through the over-unders. Ohio State 10.5, Penn State 10, Michigan 8.5, Sparty 5, Indiana 6.5, Maryland 3.5, Rutgers 3.
Shockingly, I like Maryland under 3.5, which is crazy to think about, but I think there's some value there, and I like the over at Ohio State.
Over Ohio State official.
Yes.
All right, I'm with you.
I kind of want to say under on Michigan, but I would need to look at that one a little harder.
To the West, to me, this is one, maybe two-team race. But your thoughts?
We'll just rename this the Big Ten Wisconsin. How about that?
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah. Iowa, who knows? Maybe they do something, but I don't think so. I think Wisconsin, they have one of the better tight ends in the league. They have a returning quarterback. They have one of the better offensive lines in the league. So I think they chew through this side of the division. I would love to see Minnesota play a couple times because I think they made a great hire. Steal away Rowe. So hopefully in the next few years they can make a run at this.
Yeah, Wisconsin gets Michigan and Northwestern at home. They avoid Ohio State and Penn State. Decent amount of guys returning. They may be able to run the table.
I looked at their schedule pretty hard. Just because they're not explosive makes me hesitate running the table with them. But, man, their schedule is so favorable. I just don't see where they lose.
Well, you tell me where they could trip up. I'll go through it quickly. Utah State, Florida Atlantic, at BYU, bye week, Northwestern home, at Nebraska, Purdue home, Maryland home, at Illinois, at Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, at Minnesota.
I mean, I like that they get Michigan and Iowa at home. Obviously, those are the two logical trip-up spots, but that's not how college football works. So I would say it's either at Indiana or at Nebraska. Something weird happens.
That's a good call. I agree there. But I would have to lean the over at 10.5 on Wisconsin.
Agreed. I mean, honestly, we're trying to find a loss. On the surface, there is no loss.
Anybody sneak up? If it is, I don't think anybody sneaks up. But if it is somebody, who is it?
I guess Iowa, by default. I don't really have many reasons for that. Maybe Northwestern. I kind of like Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald's team, again, should be, pretty good. They're one of those teams, kind of like Duke, though, where I like some of their players, but I don't know if they have the depth for the Big Ten schedule to hold up.
I'm with you. If I had to pick a team, I think Minnesota could surprise, row the boat. I think they could open 7-0, but those last 5 are brutal.
Brutal last 5. I always am leery of the first-year head coach at a new school. It always scares me away from the totals.
Any over-unders you like here? Wisconsin 10.5, Northwestern 8.5. Minnesota 7.5, Nebraska 7, Iowa 7, Illinois 3.5, Purdue 2.5.
No, I like Wisconsin only.
Yeah, I also lean Wisconsin over the 10.5. I have Ohio State over Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game with Penn State in the conversation for a playoff.
Exactly what I have.
Pac-12. Your overall thoughts on the Pac-12?
Improved conference is what I wrote down in capital letters. I think some of these teams are going to be better than what people think. Obviously, there's only one team that's getting all the talk, and I'm sure one of our listeners would like us to talk about them only, but we're not going to do that. And maybe that team doesn't even get picked by one of us. We'll have to see. But improved conference overall, especially from what it was a couple of years ago, to me.
I completely agree. I think that, especially on the north side, there's 2 or 3 teams that could possibly win it. I do think USC's got a favorable draw on their side of the division.
You don't say.
I tried to figure out who could finish second there, and it was a flip of the coin for me.
I don't like any of the teams on the south side, even including USC. Too much hype for me. But I think they win that side. We'll just get the south out of the way first. I think USC wins that side by default. The talent disparity on that side is enormous. UCLA would be the team that finished second to me just because of the quarterback situation. He can play. Rosin's really good, but Colorado lost a lot last year. So, to me, they would be the other team that could sneak up, but they just lost too many guys.
Who is the better pro prospect, Rosin or Darnold?
Everyone's going to say Darnold, but I need to see the kid play a little bit more. He hasn't, he didn't play his full season last year. It's probably him, but I did read a couple things, just pre-draft stuff, that evaluators are already worried about his release in the NFL. He's got one of those long wind-up releases, so that's just something to look at during the games this year. It's going to be tough to evaluate him because USC starts off the year with a pretty favorable schedule, so I'm sure that hype train will be rolling down the tracks at full speed.
This may seem a little odd to ask, but based on the way they finished last year, everybody's pretty high on them. But are we sure that they're even good? They got hot at the end of the year last year. These are their wins. Obviously, Colorado ended up being pretty good. But Arizona State, Colorado, Arizona, Cal, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, Notre Dame.
Yeah, I don't know if they're good. It feels like to me whenever this hype train gets rolling with USC, they always fail to live up to expectations.
I'm with you. I wanted to pick against them, but I just can't. I worry that they don't have enough experienced skill position. They lost a lot on the O-line, including their left tackle. I want to see Darnold with some pressure in his face and getting hit a couple times.
That's the key to me, is if they're in a close ball game, do their guys have the mental fortitude to win that game? Have they been in that situation enough times?
Well, would the hype train be as high as it is if James Franklin didn't play conservative or McSorley didn't throw that interception and Penn State ends up winning the Rose Bowl?
Probably. If the game is still played out the similar fashion where USC puts up a ton of points, yeah, probably.
Can anyone surprise here?
No, I don't think so.
I agree. So we both have USC. The over-under is USC 10, UCLA 7, Colorado 7.5, Arizona State 5, Utah 5.5, and Arizona 4.5. Anything jump out?
Colorado under, I think, might be a decent play.
I agree. They have Washington and USC at home, and all their winnable games are on the road, which is always tough in college.
Yeah, scary, especially for a team that was down for a long time and finally had a good year last year.
Shifting gears to the north, which actually has me excited for once.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I think there's a few good teams in this division. I think Oregon will be improved. I think Stanford's going to be really good. I think Washington's going to be really good. And I think our Washington State team, especially at home, is going to be tough to beat. I see this division as sneaky good across the country if you're stacking it up, actually.
I'm with you. I love the hire of Willie Taggart at Oregon. Washington didn't lose much. I looked at this today and just staggering number. Chris Peterson is 119-26 as a head coach. I know he got a couple freebies at Boise State, but that's still impressive to me. And then Stanford, who I think has the best coach in the country, with David Shaw. And Washington State's probably going to upset somebody with Leach and Luke Falk back at quarterback.
Yep. Love Falk.
So we get Stanford against USC next week, and then Stanford, Washington, November 10th in Stanford. How does this play out?
Even though I just said it's a great division, I think this comes down to two teams, Stanford and Washington. Stanford has a little bit tougher schedule in my mind, but man, I love the way they play. Like you said, I think Shaw's, if not the best, top 5 coach in the country. But I think Chris Peterson also might be in that conversation. I think the edge to me is with the quarterback. I'll take the combo of Peterson and the quarterback Browning over anybody else in this division. I think that's what puts them over the top. And dare I say, I might take Peterson Browning over Helton Darnold in the Pac-12 overall. Sorry, Sidlowski, but that's just how I feel.
Interesting. So this is going to certainly spark conversation, because I have Stanford beating Washington and winning this side of the division. I love their over-under at 9, but they did play last week, so I won't give it out.
Trying to cheat.
Washington, I think, takes a slight step back.
Just from their team last year, I think you could say that. They lost some weapons, which is big in college football. Weapons kind of separate teams. And so does depth, but I think it's just, you can't underestimate the importance of a great coach and a really good quarterback. If you have a quarterback in college, I think you can beat teams just with that. Plus, I really like their schedule. I can see them opening up 8, 9, 10-0, and then that game against Stanford. I mean, they get UCLA and Oregon at home, which I think is a big deal. The only tough game in their opening slate is at Colorado, and I'm not sure how tough that is, what we just talked about. So I think the game at Stanford realistically determines who wins the division.
Yeah, they should walk into home against UCLA October 28th an easy 7-0.
Yeah.
I think both of those games, though, on November 4th for Washington, they host Oregon, and Stanford goes on the road to Washington State. Could be sneaky with that Friday night game, Stanford-Washington in Stanford.
The schedule makers knew what they were doing with those two look-ahead games.
So I have Stanford.
We need to circle those games for lines, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have Stanford coming out, and I have Stanford beating USC in the Pac-12 championship.
I have Washington coming out, and I have Washington beating USC.
Over-unders in this side. Stanford 9, they already played, so they're out. Washington 10, Oregon 7.5, Washington State 7, Oregon State's at 5.5, who already played, and Cal's at 3.5.
Based on what I just said, I think Washington only loses one game if they do lose a game, so obviously I would be on the over there.
Official?
I'm not sure yet. I need to think about it, I think, but I do like them a lot. I like the way their schedule sets up. The only concern would be if they lose that game, just kind of being really deflated the rest of the year.
Anything else jump out over under?
No, not to me. I like Stanford too. Before they, I guess I should have said that out last week, but I did like Stanford too.
Stanford, Washington, USC seem to be the three top teams here. Can any be in the conversation for the playoff without winning or even playing in the Pac-12 championship?
I think you'd have to play in the Pac-12 championship and lose. I think it would have to be definitely USC just because of the name. If they lose the Pac-12 championship, but they are a one-loss team, definitely. And I think Stanford and Washington, if they're both one-loss teams that lose to USC or something like that, could still be in the conversation.
Moving ahead to the NFL. Your thoughts on the SEC this year?
I don't see much difference in the SEC this year than compared to any other year. I think it's a very similar year. Tons of defensive athletes. First round draft in the NFL this year is going to be about 4 or 5 quarterbacks, and I think the rest are going to be SEC players. And I think you're going to see exactly what you've come to expect from the SEC. Terrible quarterback play, but unbelievable defensive talent.
Starting in the West, anybody challenge Alabama?
I might surprise here, but I really like Auburn, and I really like LSU. LSU obviously gets the same type of talent Bama does. They can never throw the ball around, though, with Les Miles. But the hiring of Matt Canada, to me, was one of the more underrated moves of the offseason. I think he's going to finally be able to unlock the throwing aspect of football in LSU. Obviously, they have a couple Heisman candidates on defense and at running back, but I think Canada's hire is really going to change things there.
I'm wait-and-see approach with LSU. I agree on that. I worry a little bit about Orgeron.
I'm hoping he just takes a step back.
I think it's a tough final stretch for them at Bama, Arkansas, Tennessee, A&M. But they're certainly going to be in position to challenge Alabama. As far as Auburn goes, I do like them. I think they're a better team than they were last year. Malzahn with a quarterback, the transfer from Baylor, Stidham, who is a Heisman dark horse. I just think that schedule is brutal. At Clemson week 2, then later in the year at LSU, at Arkansas, at A&M, Georgia, and Bama.
Their back half is brutal. I think the combination of finally having a quarterback, and I actually think Gus Malzahn is sort of on a hot seat and needs to do something, is what leads me. I'm not saying they're going to win the division. You just asked me for a dark horse.
Yep. I actually think Auburn could be 8-4 and be one of the better teams in the country.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. I think them and LSU have a chance to win 8. LSU maybe get to 9, something like that. And I think that would surprise some people.
If Bama were to trip up, tell me where it is. Florida State, Fresno State, Colorado State, at Vandy, Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, bye week, LSU, at Miss State, Mercer, at Auburn.
I have 3 circled. Obviously, week 1 versus Florida State, neutral field. Florida State is probably on a similar talent playing field as them, so that's a logical tripping up point. And the other 2 games I have circled are LSU, reasons I just mentioned. If LSU has a quarterback, that really sets them apart from other teams in this division. And then at Auburn, just because it's a rivalry game, Auburn might have a quarterback. Gus Malzahn has traditionally frustrated Nick Saban. Those are the 3 I have circled.
Over-unders in this division, Alabama 10.5, Auburn 9, LSU 9, A&M 7.5, Arkansas 6, Mississippi State 5, Ole Miss 5.5.
Oh man, I thought LSU and Auburn were 8.5, creeping up to 9. I don't like them as much, and I think I lean under on Texas A&M.
Is Sumlin on the hot seat?
He might be the hottest seat in the country. I think his AD basically said as much the other day.
I'll go through their schedule really quick because I think they're interesting with Sumlin's situation. At UCLA, Nicholls State, Louisiana Tech, Arkansas, South Carolina, Alabama. Those are all home games, by the way. At Florida, Miss State, Auburn, New Mexico, at Ole Miss, at LSU to conclude the year. I think it's either really surprising or really surprising the other way.
I mean, just off of that, I count 5 probable losses and maybe 6. I think that gets him fired.
Freshman quarterback, most likely that Kyle Allen moved on. Yeah. How quickly are we going to hear the clamors for Chip Kelly?
Well, I think the one saving thing for someone is that most of the schedule is backloaded. UCLA, obviously, to start, is not the easiest starting game playing against a good quarterback like that, but then they have 2 weeks in a row where we'll get wins against Lafayette and Nicholls. You know, I think the stretch that is going to determine his fate is Arkansas, South Carolina. He has to win both of those games before Bama, Florida.
Yeah, if you remember correctly, UCLA was leading that game last year till Myles Garrett took over.
Yes.
And there's no Myles Garrett this year to bail him out.
No. So it will be interesting. Is that a job that would intrigue Chip Kelly, though?
I would think the state of Texas would intrigue Chip Kelly. I think he's a pretty good talent evaluator when it comes to college football.
I actually think that's the job, something like that he would rather be at than, say, actual University of Texas where it's too big.
I think there's 3 teams in the SEC that may be in the Chip Kelly sweepstakes. Auburn, as you mentioned earlier, with Malzahn on the hot seat. A&M, and then as we move to the East, I think Butch Jones is on the hot seat at Tennessee.
Yeah, unfortunately, I actually love Chip Kelly fit in Tennessee.
I do as well.
I think he could dominate there.
The East Division, interesting to me, but I want to hear your thoughts.
I went back and forth on this one on who I thought was going to win. I think this is a mediocre division once again. Man, I want to like Tennessee, but I think losing Dobbs really hurts them, and I do think they're looking for a new coach maybe mid-season. I still don't love the hiring of Muschamp at South Carolina, and I think this is a typical Georgia-Florida division. Both teams have flaws. Georgia should take a step up with the second-year quarterback. Florida, I really like their defense as always, but they also have quarterback questions. So I think it comes down to their game, their cocktail party matchup.
Yeah, I am with you. I do lean Georgia just because of Eason. I do like a second-year coach, Kirby Smart. Chubb back, 17 starters back, basically the whole defense back. There's something weird to me about McElwain in Florida. I think he's a good coach, but I just don't think he fits there.
Yeah, they have made it work, though, somehow, winning that division. It almost seems like they're trying. I know they haven't had good quarterback play, so you got to win how you can, but it just seems like they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, like you said. I lean Florida just because of the defensive talent. I worry about Georgia's back seven specifically. It's been a problem for a few years. I think they give up way too many big plays. And Georgia, maybe the culture's changed, but I don't know. They always seem to lose a couple games that they have no business losing.
Florida gets LSU and A&M at home, back to back. Either of those stumbling blocks for them?
I think any team in this division on any day could stumble to another team. I mean, I don't love Florida's schedule. I actually think they have for their team, I think they have a tough schedule. They have to play Michigan. They do get Tennessee at home, LSU at home, but I don't think those are layup wins. If they don't play well, I think Tennessee can beat them at home. It's that kind of team.
Yeah, quarterback, coach, and schedule are the reason I lean Georgia. But it wouldn't shock me if Florida won this division.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Either of those could give Alabama any trouble in the SEC title?
Definitely not.
And is anybody in the conversation other than Bama?
Don't think so.
So give me your, actually, for the coach, let's go over the Irish.
I don't have any notes on the Irish.
I actually don't either. I have their over-under at 7.5, I believe it is. Let me get their schedule.
I will surprise you, though. I do follow their recruiting, just like every other team, and they're still getting good players. And I do think Brian Kelly's going to be on a mission this year. I actually like the over 7.5. I looked at their schedule earlier. I think they lose to USC, but I think if they can, and Stanford, but I think if they can somehow beat Miami and or Georgia, I think they win 8 or 9 here.
Temple, win. Georgia, toss-up, I agree. At Boston College, win. At Sparty.
Interesting game.
Yeah, toss-up to me. Miami, Ohio's a win. At North Carolina is somewhat interesting.
That's a win.
Bye week, and then they get USC at home. NC State at home. Wake at home. At Miami. Navy at home. At Stanford.
I think they're going to be better than what people think.
I agree. I like their quarterback, Wimbush. I was somewhat familiar with him. He almost committed to Penn State, so I know a little bit about him. I think he fits the Brian Kelly mold of what he's looking for.
Maybe I'm in the minority. It sure seems like that now, but I think Brian Kelly's a really good coach.
Is he on the hot seat, or does he leave to take NFL position?
That's what I've kind of never understood. It seems like just because he's rumored for the NFL, it seems like he's on the hot seat. So I can't tell which is right. Is he on the hot seat, or does he just want to be in the NFL? Notre Dame expectations are really high, so maybe he is on the hot seat, but I can't. Who else are you going to get that's better than him?
Chip would be intriguing, but I don't know why he would take this with having to deal with that alumni.
No, don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting year for them. With the way things played out last year, going 4-8 with, I thought, the best quarterback in the country.
I really liked Kaiser too. I don't think he played up to expectations, but to only win four games with that talent was disappointing, to say the least. That's why no one's talking about it. That's why I kind of think they might bounce back.
Any chance that they're in the playoff conversation?
Let's see. I think they'd have to beat USC. Obviously, they'd have to be undefeated going into that game. So they beat USC and they're undefeated going to Miami, then yes.
All right, your Final Four.
Final Four are looking a little different than some people's, but I went Ohio State, Alabama, Florida State, and the Bob Stoopless Oklahoma Sooners.
Well, we have three of the same. I have Bama, Ohio State, Florida State, and the Cardinal of Stanford.
Yeah, I like that call.
And I have the Buckeyes beating Alabama in the title.
I have the Ohio State Buckeyes beating Alabama in the title.
So is Buckeyes plus 650 to win the title worth a couple shekels?
I think it's worth a unit or two, but I do have a couple other value plays that might be more intriguing.
Go ahead, give me them. I have a couple written down as well.
I think for teams that are very close, the only reason I have Ohio State going that far, obviously I think they're the best team in the country, but that game against Penn State is just going to mean so much, and they get it at home. But I think Penn State at twice the price at $1,600
Correct.
is pretty valuable.
I have them.
I think the Wisconsin Badgers at $3,300 is ridiculously valuable.
I have them.
I have the Oklahoma State Pokes at $3,300 as extremely valuable.
I have them.
And if you want to get totally crazy and just throw down $1 to lose. How about the Fighting Bill Snyders out of that astronomical number?
The only other one I had that you didn't have was Stanford at plus 7,500.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
So I had the other teams I had in the mix for playoff conversation was Oklahoma State, Penn State, USC, and Wisconsin. That could be in the mix despite not playing for the conference title.
That's how I
or not winning the conference.
The Snyder's one was just for fun because the number seemed crazy high. Obviously, it would be a miracle if they got to that schedule, but the other teams are all ones that if they win one game or one game falls differently, then all of a sudden that value probably drops in half, or their line drops in half, and you're getting incredible value.
I have officials of Ohio State over 10.5, Oklahoma State over 9, and possibly Washington over 10.
What are your thoughts on Wisconsin?
Oh, that's right. I did have an X there. That was 10.5.
That's a high one.
I don't know if I can pull the trigger.
I think we come back to Washington and Wisconsin. We need a closer look.
Yeah, we'll post those before Saturday starts.
Yeah.
Well, great job by you on the college football preview. We'll be back later today for the golf preview.
That was fun, buddy. Tip of the cap.
All right, talk to you soon.
All right, buddy.